So today's Learn at Lunch, we actually have representatives from the HNE Ethics Office and Governance Office that will give us a good rundown of the pathways that we need to follow in order to gain ethic approval for our studies and governance approval too. So there'll be time for questions at the end as well. So if anyone has any specific ones, hold them to the end, and hopefully we can be on top of what we need to get ethics and do the right thing. Okay, so I'll hand over to Sarah first.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Moberley. You probably know me by name. I just want to, how do I page down? How do I? Let's see.
Oh,
Yeah.
does that microphone work? It's pretty loud back here though.
Oh, sorry.
Hello. Hello. Does it work? Okay, there you go. If you want to hold this, and you might just have to click on that bottom part there.
Perfect.
Yes, there you go.
So, can everyone hear me?
I think you
No.
might need to use the mic.
Can everyone hear me now? Can everyone hear me now? So it's really great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Just wanted to start by acknowledging the lands that we're on today and respect our elders, past, present and future. This is the land that I live on, the Wonnarua land. It's at least what it looked like before the recent flooding. So our team, if I can get them to stand up, please. And Deborah. So this is Lisa Wazine. She's our research support coordinator and our Regis guru. Lisa leads the drop-in session on Thursdays at 10 o'clock. And we're always here to help. Next is Elizabeth Montgomery, who's just joined us in the last week and a half as our ethics admin officer, and Deborah Madden, who is unfortunately retiring at the end of this week after a long history of supporting research across the district. Thank you. I've got our internet page there. So the key messages today, when you think about ethics, I just want you to stay calm, contact our office early if you're unsure what the pathway is for ethical clearance. We offer a pre-submission review, so send all your documents well in advance and I can give some feedback about what the ethics committee are likely to be looking for and asking for. Go to your source documents, look at the national statement and other relevant legislation. And if you can put a reviewer hat on, you are all experts in your field, but we rely on the written word. So if you can think of yourself as a reviewer, that will help us in reviewing the applications. So we get it. We know that ethics can be a daunting process, but our team works really hard to support researchers through the process to make it as smooth and as efficient as possible. So the things I wanted to outline today is the national guidelines, when ethical clearance is or isn't required, the ethical pathways, what happens from our side of things, post-approval activities, some tips, accountability, and to let you know in terms of our key performance indicators how well we are doing. So first of all, when we're deciding whether you need ethical clearance or not, the two key factors is looking at risk and the type of data involved. So if there's a greater than negligible risk, you'll need a full application in Regis. And if you're looking at identifiable data, that also triggers a full application in Regis. So when we talk about negligible risk, the definition of that, according to the national statement, is anything more than discomfort. So the triggers for review is if you're doing a project outside of Hunter, New England, we can't approve it from a non-ethics pathway. If you're gathering information about a participant beyond what is collected for routine care, if you're looking at innovative protocols, randomizing participants, if there's any risks, so not just risk of harm, but risk of professional reputation. We also need ethical oversight. If you're using data that was originally collected for quality or evaluation and you want to use it for another purpose, that needs to go to the committee. And if you're comparing cohorts. So we've got a new online checklist for Hunter New England led projects. So you can click on this link. We can share the slides. It's no problem. So if you submit that, I'll try and look at it within a day or two and give you feedback to go ahead or let you know that you need a full application in Regis, or you can go ahead, but you need to comply with sharing data outside of the LHD policy that Kristy will assist with. So if you have to go down the Regis pathway, there are two options. We've got an expedited pathway for lower risk projects. So that is, there's no deadline for that. You can submit that in Regis at any time. So it's low risk unless you're asking for a waiver of consent or unless you're working with vulnerable populations. If you are working with either of those populations or it's greater than low risk, then it's a full application in Regis. So the deadline is the last working day of the month. So this is the checklist that you'll see if you log on to the portal to complete that. Oh, sorry, that is not the checklist. This is the mandatory checklist. So for new applications, we developed this checklist in response to a major breach that we were dealing with last year, where some investigators were actually not aware that they were listed on a protocol. And some of the senior investigators had clearly not read the application before it came to them. So we ask that you complete this checklist for all applications in Regis moving forward. So what happens? The last business day of the month, applications close. If your application is not eligible then, it will most likely not make the meeting for that month. So recommend you either submit early for a pre-submission review or submit a few days before the deadline to make sure if there are any issues that we can fix them and still get it to the agenda for the next month. So it comes to the executive officer, they will decide, yes, go ahead, or it's ineligible and send it back for more information. Then gets assigned to the meeting. We assign reviewers. The HREC decides if they need more information or if we can outright approve, hopefully. It then gets sent back for more information. So that is sent to you. The HREC meeting is on the second Wednesday of the month, and we try and get the feedback to you by the Friday. So we ask that if you do submit an application, be ready to respond to any concerns or questions from the committee the following week so that we can get the keep the momentum going and get that approval done as soon as we can. And just to remind you, these are the four values of the national statement. We will be looking at the science. We have to make sure that the design of the study is able to answer the research question. We look at justice, beneficence, and respect. So we look at all those things. Sometimes people don't think the ethics committee should be asking questions about methodology, but it's well within our remit. So here are some common avoidable requests for more information. I completely get it. You've probably been working on this application with various people, working on various versions, and it's easy to lose track of version control. So if there's contradictions between documents, we'll have to clarify that. All participant-facing documents need to meet the requirements of the National Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare. So it needs to be, we aim for grade 8 using a readability or literacy editor. If you can clarify that before you submit. All documents need a footer. I know it must sound boring, but it's how we keep track of versions in Regis. So we will send things back if they don't have the appropriate footer. Another common request for more information is that the justification of the sample size is not adequate. We also ask frequently for details of data management and retention. The committee really is going to be looking at how you're recruiting patients. So we really need to know the details of who is doing that. Is there any potential for coercion? And has that been mitigated? If so, you'll also, as soon as you start on your ETH application, you'll have a reference number that you can include in the complaint statement. So again, what makes a good application? The reviewers include people who are senior clinicians, senior researchers. We have a lawyer, we have a clergy person, we have several community members. So your application might be reviewed by any of those. So if you can think about when you're writing, think about who's going to be reading it and write for them. It's really helpful if you refer to the sections of the national statement before you finish your application so that you have justified your approach according to those guidelines. It's also really important that all members of the community have equal access. So it's too common that people say we're excluding people that don't speak English. So in Hunter, New England, we have the Multicultural Health Unit that will translate research documents for free. So I encourage you to take them up on that. I think it's also important to consider how the language that you use. So to you, it might not be, what's the word? Just to think how some people might take offence to some of the descriptions of the research. If you can be thoughtful and consistent, again, pre-submission review, check the literacy level of all of your participant-facing documents. And another recommendation is to give yourself options. Like, we need details, but don't be too prescriptive, if that makes any sense. So don't tell us that the survey is only going to be open for 3 months. That is not going to change the ethical risks of the study, and you don't want to have to come back to us if you need more time. If you're specifying your methods of collecting data, you can include several options. If something doesn't work, that you might use electronic versions. So just give yourself options. So data management, I've put the link here for the NHMRC guideline document. Just a reminder that any research data needs to stay within the institution firewalls. You can't take it home to a home computer on a USB or anything like that. So what's next? You've got your approval, and if you need it, you've got governance approval from Kristy. But if anything changes, you need to let us know via a general amendment. So we just need to know what's new, why it's being changed, and are there any ethical implications? We don't need a big backstory. We just need those 3 issues addressed. We need an amendment if you're adding a new site or changing the coordinating principal investigator or a site principal investigator. We don't need to add project staff to the ethics application. We need to know if you need an extension, and we need an annual progress report, which the other thing on accountability is if new evidence becomes available that changes the risks of the study for participants, then you need to let us know as soon as possible. So the Australian Code for the Responsible Conduct of Research outlines responsibilities for researchers. You are in breach of that code if you're conducting research outside of the approvals, and that includes regular milestone reporting, so every year. I've already talked. So we have had quite a few breaches in the past recent period. Some of those are related to data management. So data has not been stored according to approved procedures. On one instant, consent was not obtained according to the ethically approved procedures, and not seeking site approval before recruiting from a public health organisation. And we do appreciate that sometimes historically that has been occurring, but breaches of the code are really serious and could result in a misconduct investigation. So finally, just to let you know how we're performing, our key performance indicators include the number of ethics applications that are approved within 90 days. which has been at 100% for 2 years now. We are one of the quickest ethics committee in the state. We've been doing lots of improvement activities thanks to Lisa and Deb. And now, instead of the application being with the researcher for most of the time, it's actually with the ethics committee. So I think that's it from me. Just a reminder that we're here for you. Just reach out at any time. Do you want questions now, or do you want to hand over to Kristy? Yes.
So they say project staff doesn't need to be on the ethics. I think you've done that. So adding them in.
We don't need to know.
You don't need to know who's working on it.
No, we expect you to manage that with a delegation log and a training log.
Okay.
And so if they're coming to a public health organisation, they'll need to be added to the site.
Yeah.
But otherwise, we leave it to the coordinating principal investigator to manage.
Okay.
Yes. Again, we don't need to know if they're not coming on site. But again, if they're on the training and delegation log, that's all we need. That's all we expect.
So they need to be added to the site-specific application?
If they're on site, yes. I think my predecessor wanted everyone that was accessing data on the ethics application, but it's actually not, it's not necessary.
And I might hold my next question for after Kristy, in case you answer it.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much.
I think I'd just like to say that the efficiency is amazing. Like we just submitted one on the last training. Right, was it? And we're approved already. Like that's remarkable. Like so the new systems are really working well.
Yeah, we work really hard to try and support the important work that you do. No, yeah, very welcome. Yep.
Been like again so quickly. Okay, thank you everybody. So my name's Kristy Morris, Manager of Research Governance for HNE New England Local Health District. I think quite a few in the room are I'm familiar with, but if not, nice to meet you. So just here to give an overview of what research governance means and what it is. So research governance is a framework through which institutions are accountable for the research they authorise to be conducted at their site. So for New South Wales Health, research governance can be defined as a framework by which institutions, investigators and their managers are accountable for the research conducted according to ethical principles, scientific, regulatory and professional standards and the principle of risk management. So research governance does apply to all forms of human research and it fosters that research culture of high integrity and good practice. So in accordance with the relevant New South Wales health policy, all human research that takes place within a New South Wales health public health organisation must meet the appropriate governance standards. As per the New South Wales Health Delegations Manual, only the Chief Executive or the Chief Executive Delegate has the authority to authorise the conduct of research within their sites. So within HNE New England Local Health District, the CE Delegate for Research Authorisation lays with the position of Manager of Research Governance. So no research whatsoever must take place in any HNE New England site without the appropriate written notification of site authorisation from the Research Office. So there are 3 steps to research approvals. So I just wanted to recap. First is project registration, which comes before ethics. Then it's the research ethics approval. And then thirdly is site authorisation, which is what we term research governance. So just want you to consider this research authorisation pathway. Consider the site authorisation pathway prior to submitting your project registration, as it does make a difference, especially in terms of what ethics committee to go to
and different requirements for your project. So there are two ways to seek site authorisation within HNE New England. One is site-specific application via Regis, and second is access request application, which is a more simple application via email. So if you're unsure what pathway your project refers to, please reach out to the research office early, because we don't want to send you to the middle of the lake. If you submit an access request application via Regis, via an SSA, you're not going to meet the requirements. So you're going to constantly be ineligible, so to speak. So site-specific application. So a site-specific application is required if HNE's involvement in the project includes enrolling participants into research, in taking that informed consent, carrying out protocol-specific procedures with or on participants, or managing and analysing data, tissue, or responses from surveys and questionnaires collected for or from the research. We do have detailed guidance on our research portal on how to submit an SSA. At the moment, I think most of you might be external to HNE New England, so our internet portal is currently under development with the HNE Comms unit. It was scrambled late last year by a project that they were doing, so the information is very hard to find. So until that is fixed, which we're hoping within the next month, reach out to us and we can provide you those tools and guidance via email. So an access request pathway is usually for those external research projects and should be submitted when HNE New England's involvement in the project is participant recruitment through posters, leaflets, handouts, or letter of invitation, but not recruitment through that direct contact with participants or taking that informed consent on site. If your project requires distribution of surveys and questionnaires through the staff of HNE, but we're not collating or analysing the responses within HNE. Or if you require access to tissue or data within HNE, but we're not processing or analysing that tissue or data. So there's a really good decision tree on our portal that helps guide you through which pathway to take, the access request or the SSA. So please, if you are unsure, I do recommend that you reach out early before your project registration so I can help you determine which pathway that your project should take. So why it is important to consider the pathway early. So it is important to consider HNE's involvement early, as it will determine which research governance pathway to take, as I just mentioned, but it also determines a number of other requirements that should be considered up front. So for example, if your project meets the SSA pathway, we can only accept ethics approval from an NHMRC registered and certified HREC, which is part of the National Mutual Acceptance Scheme. And that's per our New South Wales Health Policy. So HNE New England HREC has been registered and certified by the NHMRC. So for SSA applications where we're involved in that conduct of the research, the HNE New England site PI must be employed by HNE New England. So any external staff who require access to clinical systems or they're on site performing a protocol procedure, i.e. taking that informed consent, must be onboarded as a HNE New England contingent worker. If your project meets the access request pathway with ethics approval, we can accept NHMRC registered but not certified ethics committee approvals. So the University of Newcastle is one of many registered with the NHMRC ethics committees, but they're not certified. So again, please reach out to the research office if you're unsure, because access request is a lot more simple than the SSA, and we don't want to send you through the wrong pathway. So if you're submitting an SSA with a HNE New England site and it is a clinical trial, there are a number of additional requirements for clinical trials. So I'm not going to go into too much detail with what they are, but I will list that the clinical trial management system is a mandatory requirement if the intervention or the project is being conducted within a HNE New England site. We do require good clinical practice certificates for all SSA team members listed on the SSA and the CV of the HNE PI. We do require copies, evidence of insurance if it's a commercial and non-commercial sponsored trial, and we do require that Medicines Australia standard indemnity document if it's a commercial sponsored trial. A clinical trial research agreement is a mandatory requirement for all clinical trials. If it's a drug trial and the drug's not being used for that purpose, then a CTN evidence is applicable as well. We do have fees for governance review for clinical trials, which have to be considered before drafting the clinical trial research agreement. And they're not so new anymore. They've been around for about 12 months, but we do have new bank account details for clinical trials where it's just not one set of details anymore. All the bank account details are vendor specific. So Pay New South Wales, that email there can let you know which sponsor belongs to which bank account details. So again, we've got the requirements on how to submit an SSA on our intranet portal. Until our internet's fixed, please reach out and we'll send you those. So if you are conducting a clinical trial, I do recommend that you do follow the clinical trial or do use the standard operating procedures that we have on our portal that were developed by the R3 team. So with our portal, we have some really good tools on our research portal. This is a little overview of it. So again, you probably won't get access just yet, but do reach out if we can provide anything in addition here. I haven't gone into too much about data sharing, so I can quickly, I think there's a policy you might be familiar with, PD 2018-001. It's where ethics have approved a waiver of consent to collect retrospective data from health. So that doesn't actually authorise the data to be shared to an external party. So if that data will be going to HMRI servers, for example, or the University of Newcastle, we do have an additional policy that has to be complied there. But on the 3rd of July, we actually are holding a webinar about the use of health data that I do invite you all to attend as well. If you want to know those details, reach out after and we can send you the webinar link. And that will go through the use of health data. I think Sarah's talking. I'm talking on the process of compliance of this policy. And then Patrick from HMRI is going to talk about what type of data to collect also. So some take-home messages today. I think it's important to determine that correct approval pathway early. So again, do reach out. Use the resources available on our portal. There's some really good guidance tools about how to fill out your SSA or the access request decision pathway. Do contact the research office if you're unsure, and there's my email. So I would much prefer to have a 30-minute MS Teams meeting up front to get the process right before you submit. And I'm happy to run through your SSA if it's determined that the SSA pathway is the right one for your project. Any questions? Did I answer your question, Vanessa? No. Okay, over to you.
Just clarify what you said. So clinical trials or clinical study. So what if the clinic's happening, the physician asks the patient, would you be interested in participating in this research? And they say yes, or talking to someone rather.
Yep.
About this research, and then say yeah, and then we say, oh, we've got a researcher in clinic with us today. Who will that will give you a consent form or something to take a view, etc.
Yep.
Does that mean it's a HNE application? Because the researcher is on site.
Yeah, so
The consent.
ideally, the patient would come to clinic. The clinician would say, oh, there's a research project I think you may be eligible and interested in. Here is a flyer. Contact the external research team and they can give you further information. That's a clear-cut access request. If we've got researchers in clinic, may blur because they're on site having to be a contingent worker to health. But if they're a contingent worker to health and they're also just handing out that flyer, access request. If anything further is done on site, because that would then mean the external researchers, like if the patient's interested, they would contact the external research team via the information on that flyer. External research team would then consent the patient, I imagine over the phone or here at HMRI, and they become research participants, not HNE New England patients.
We're just looking at ways to improve, to help, I guess, clinicians in the clinic in terms of reducing the burden of trying to offer people in the clinic research studies.
Yeah.
But also improve our opportunities for improvement.
Yeah.
So we're wanting to, back in the old days, we used to have a researcher in the clinic. We're looking at whether or not we, might think that that's an effective pathway. So this might really be important for us.
Yeah, if they're taking that informed consent on site in clinic on behalf of the HNE New England principal investigator, that's an SSA. if they're in clinic and they're a contingent worker, supervised by the principal investigator, they're like a HNE New England staff member, so they can provide a letter of handout, as long as they're not going through that information sheet and taking that informed consent. I think in a recent project of yours, that is happening. However, then there's require of access to medical records post that we weren't aware of up front. So because the access to medical records is required, we can't do that as an access request because there's that extra information of our clinical systems that's required.
So that's what I'm waiting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
I mean, we're exploring a new model there. HMRI did approve that they could be the site for that project, and we could do an access request for health, which would help with your funding proposal going to the uni. But then it come to light they needed access to medical records, so then we had to go back to the SSA because we weren't aware of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because as you know, Kristy, this has been a headache for me for many years. And doing clinical trials as a university employee and
Yeah.
having funding in the university, CTRA would help.
Yeah, so there's a new model that's being explored at the moment, and I will just say explored, where we're trying to work out models where the site is Hunter New England. So if Hunter New England's involved in the conduct of the trial, then we have to sign a CTRA with the sponsor. So part of that CTRA is there is a payment schedule. Within that payment schedule, majority of sponsors will not pay a third party. It has to be in line with that legal document of the CTRA. But we are working out ways we can try and put the university details in that schedule too of the CTRA. Now, these discussions are happening a lot higher than myself. So once we get that approval, we will operationalise it to try and test. Well, it's mainly for the commercial clinical trials, but once we can sort those models, it will go down to different, like to all clinical trials, even if they're not commercial sponsored. So I think I did say to Amber, I can chat to the uni to see if we can do that in your CTRA, as opposed to the funding coming into health and then over to the uni, which is the most simple process at the moment. Well, I think you're unique because you're a contingent worker. Okay, so if you're a contingent worker, you should have a HNE New England supervisor. I imagine that HNE New England supervisor would be in the area that you're doing the research. If not, you would need a supervisor within that area. And then you're just like a normal employee. So it would be if it's in a cost centre within respiratory. Yeah. So I think for this one, I said to Amber yesterday, given the light of the access to medical records required, that's what I meant. I said, is it necessary? And she said it is because you have to confirm the diagnosis. So I said the most simple way is to normal processes of an SSA to John Hunter, go into the respiratory cost centre, and we can arrange a funding agreement to get it over to the university. Otherwise, I can chat with the university to see if they're happy to put the uni details in our Schedule 2 of the CTRA, but that doesn't stop there. The sponsor would have to be comfortable because a lot of sponsors see that as a variation to the contracted parties, which is just sponsor and health. So it's tricky because you're a contingent worker, but it shouldn't be because you're classed as a HNE New England employee. So if you're a HNE New England employee, you've got your delegated chain and you've got access to the cost centres.
You might not know the answer. If it does come in under HNE and has cost to RON, then your RON takes the 35% on costs.
You would have to discuss that with the University Research Office. Yeah. I don't believe they can take it where it's already coming, but if it's, again, you'd have to talk to them. I can't speak on their behalf. Yeah. Because they're also revising their models and on costs and whatnot. So I think Amber, was going to check with you. Do we just go via the respiratory cost centre? Because in this case, you're viewed to me as a HNE New England employee. So you should have your supervisor and you should have access to the cost centres within respiratory. Yeah. I think so, but I think your contingent worker isn't under respiratory. Is that right? Was it under nursing and midwifery? So under medicines. Yep. Well, that should be okay because respiratory is in medicine. Yeah, but I think previously that you didn't think you had access to the cost centres within health. But you do. You just have to chat with the finance manager that's responsible for respiratory, and they should be able to set you up with a research one. Yep. Reach out if they've got any problems. Yes.
I have a question about the waiver of consent and data sharing. So I'm involved in teaching research to the medical students, and a lot of their research projects involve audits of medical records, secondary data analysis by looking at records, and they often get a waiver of consent. But I always encourage them to do a proper ethics application with their students, and they're doing it for the purpose of research, not for quality assurance. But there seems to be a blurring line between those two, and often the clinician just goes ahead and does it the way they do it. But I'm wondering about whether the student is considered external, if the data is being shared with them.
So with medical students, a lot of the medical students are already onboarded to health through their rounding processes with the doctors and their training. So I think what it comes down to is, where is the data that they're analysing being saved? Is it staying in HNE New England? Then that's okay. It can be done internally. If it's going, and I'm only talking in terms of the policy of sharing data, that extra compliance module. So if it is then going over to the university and it's being saved on the university share drive, that's where we have to add those extra policies in. So one, we just make sure they're contingent workers, and majority already are, because they're on site, they're rounding with the doctors, they've already done the New South Wales Health Code of Conduct, and already have access to the clinical systems. So if they're sitting on site and it's all staying within health, we need our approvals still, but we don't need that extra policy compliance. Yep. But I suggest ask them to log in next Thursday to our data webinar. Yes, any other questions? Yes.
Might be a bit of a curly one. We've got samples coming in from Melbourne, so there's been the ethics been approved down at a site there, and we're going to apply here to. I don't know if we need to do site-specific application, because my dilemma is, if it comes straight to me as a university person, it doesn't even involve HNE, because I'm under a PI that is employed there, Chris Grange. We may go through that route and do the hospital, because it's a lot quicker, to be honest, it's a lot quicker to go through the hospital stuff. Is there, I might send you an email, but you get the best way to deal.
Yeah, send me an email with the particulars, but it goes back to those different pathways.
Yeah.
Like if you're just using us as a loophole to get it through, probably not the best option. Yeah. Yeah, so send me an email, I'll have a look at the particulars and the protocol, and I can give you the right advice there. Yep. Any other questions?
You and Sarah, what can we do, other than, what you've just gone through, but I guess, what can we do to make sure we're on top of, all of the processes that change fairly regularly and things like that?
Yeah.
When we submitted, I didn't realise there was the mandatory kind of checklist, and I might have missed an email for that and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think that being on the HNE New England research email group that's where our main correspondence for changes occur. So we update our portals and send it through. So one, I think that every time you get a new project, either browse the portal and make sure that you're complying to the current standards, or ensure that you are monitoring. We try not to spam. We try and send, so Laura does a great job sending out a newsletter every Friday, which does, it does contain a lot of different other information other than just our research office things. But if there's changes in the research office, like for example, the changes in the new clinical trial fee policy that comes into effect 1st of July, we will send a separate email through that email group out to researchers. So it's easier to try and identify as well the separate emails to the newsletter emails, and save them in a file to make sure that you're updating your local standard operating procedures.
People that aren't on.
Yep. And they can always reach out to be added as well. Just email the research office and we'll put on. So we do have an internal and an external list. So I think, Laura, the newsletters go externally as well. Most information go internal and external. Oh, I thought that was Laura's shoes. Oh, it's Sarah Dalton's. Sorry.
It's just reach out, just let us know you've got a application coming, sorry.
Yep.
It's around, so good coffee.
Yeah, and Sarah and I will both join that meeting. If Hunter New England's a site there too, we can both join so we can get the information up front. We prefer that, to be honest, than to sit through an application that doesn't quite meet the criteria. Would rather have the Teams meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say one more thing, that there is probably same mistakes to be made over and over. So just learn from what feedback from community members are, and so you're aware the next time I need to make sure I do this, because these are the things that are going on. Just small administrative things that are so frustrating for us and so frustrating to feel looking coming back for more information. Does that application ever get through without any request? Yes. Really? Yeah. After these latest changes in efficiency. Projects that have had a detailed pre-submission, we had 40% February, no request for more information. And a good quality applications and they answer the questions appropriately. Just by your approach, probably to the next step. I think sometimes some senior researchers get very restricted. Yes. This is my juniors medicine might write better applications than I do. But it's, I'm not saying it's your team, but sometimes it's really clear that simply clinicians not better. I do read. Copy and paste thing too, just because it's in your protocol, they copy and paste it into a career, but they're not addressing their concern. They're just copy and pasting your, you're not answering the question. These are really important, they're completely different documents, but they also have to marry up. So what's in the career has to match your protocol, has to match your information machine. So you just need to be really clear and concise across documents. Same things, because it's a lot of inconsistencies. Yes. Between documents that are wrote, you always say, I have no idea what you can. Because your protocol says one thing, information sheet says another. That's
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And from a governance point of view, oh yeah, sorry.
Here in first time. I do a little dance joke.
And from a governance point of view, the number of applications that come through SSA where surveys are being sent around staff or where they're just putting flyers up in clinic, that could be via access request pathway is usually, and there's a duplication too, because they don't need to go to our HREC committee. They can go to the university's HREC committee. We can accept that approval. Otherwise, we'll be asking for local PIs and it just jumbles the process. So getting that pathway up front eliminates a lot of time and effort on both sides, which is why call me. I'll help you clarify it.
Yeah, thanks to all of you actually, it really helped with us.
It's a challenging space. We do appreciate that. There is a lot of things changing as well. So we do appreciate that. Like we've got the new fee policy, we've got the National Clinical Trials Governance Framework, we've got data policies that we're told to implement. New South Wales Health are good at landing new policies on our desk without much notice. So we're trying to build those systems to support you to do it. I know CTMS is challenging as well, but reach out. We're here to help as opposed to bang your head on the table. Let's bang our head together. Yeah.